Today in episode 50 of the podcast, we will be reviewing Kraven the Hunter, which looks to be the last of the Sony Spider-Man villain spin-off verse, and we'll be reviewing Lord of the Rings: A War of the Rohirrim. We'll also be talking about Chris Evans making his MCU return in Avengers Doomsday, and DC is moving forward to the live-action Clayface film. I'm Brad, he's Josh with a J, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
Jump into the news this week. This is the 50th episode of the show. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Almost up to a full year of the show now, which is insane.
That's crazy. If
you get a chance, go to YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscription, hit the notification bell so you're getting our episodes when they drop every single Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. Also, go to willbringthepopcorn.com for all our social media info. You can check out our archives as well as our merch store. Once again, can't thank you enough for your continued support. Going into the news this week, we have some news coming out of Star Wars where we get a big name attached to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. It seems like we were constantly adding people to this cast. And the news came out this week that Jeremy Allen White is going to be voicing Jabba the Hutt's son, Rhoda the Hutt, in the film.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Allen White is in everything now. Like, we know he's one of the big names. I love him as an actor. He's been fantastic. But it is kind of an interesting choice for him to voice a Hutt because we know they don't speak English. Everything's dubbed and they're speaking their own language and stuff. So to have a big name behind something like that, it's kind of interesting that he's going to do that sort of role. But you know, I'm still patiently waiting for Pizza the Hutt to make his glorious return in Spaceballs 2 here. So we got a lot of Hutts coming back.
A lot of the Hutts. Pizza the Hutt is a crazy reference and a crazy pull, but I love that for you. But no, it's a huge get for Star Wars. You know, like I said, they keep adding bigger and bigger names to this cast, and it seems like more people are willing to kind of jump into these universes and play these roles. And getting an actor like Jeremy Allen White, who is about as white hot of an actor right now as you can get, with he's playing He's playing Bruce Springsteen in the upcoming biopic for that. Obviously huge with The Bear and all the things successful with that. His star is really on the upswing right now. So getting somebody who's that white hot to be a part of your project right now is a big deal. And the fact that he's playing a Hutt of all things, like he's not playing a Jedi, he's not playing...
Yeah, I thought he would be a face, someone you would see on screen if you
want to put that face on
Wars.
Screen. But yeah, he's taking on a role of a Hutt, which, like you said, notoriously do not speak English in these films in their dub, so it's curious how they're going to utilize his voice now. Is he going to be the one Hutt that does communicate with everybody that way? Or you never know with Star Wars. You never know what you're going to get. But that just adds even more excitement to a movie that we're already eagerly anticipating the release of when it finally makes its way into theaters. And getting an actor of that caliber is just a huge milestone for them.
So is Rhoda the Hutt opening up an Italian beef restaurant on Tatooine?
He might have to get those beef sandwiches in. I love that show, The Bear, so much. It's so freaking good,
fantastic.
And it's getting all of the awards again as it should for the Golden Globes and everything coming up. But yeah, just a brilliant actor. I would love to see that incorporated into Star Wars somehow, but I kind of got a feeling they're going to shy away from that.
When I first saw this, my mind instantly went to, Phantom Menace, where they had a diner with an alien creature and stuff. I'm like, all right, there's Jeremy Allen White. He could play his son or distant relative.
Like the Hutt that works in a kitchen. Like that would be crazy.
Order up.
I would love it though. I would love it, but we'll see how they incorporate Rhoda the Hutt into the film. But yeah, huge get for Star Wars, and just like I said, adds to the excitement of that film even more than I'm already hyped to see it. So throwing somebody like that in there. Let's get it.
And moving on to Marvel. So this could be a little spoilers for people because it's 2 years before we see Avengers Doomsday, and we've already got a ton of casting announcements here with one pretty big one because so if you don't want to be spoiled, just look at the timeline in our videos. It's in the audio and video comments. So if you look in there and look in the description, you want to skip any spoilers when it comes to this, go right ahead. But Chris Evans has been announced that he's returning to the MCU for Avengers Doomsday. So we don't know if he is playing Captain or in what version of Captain he could be playing, if it's his older self or if they're bringing a different version. There's also rumors he could be Nomad or Captain Hydra or something else. So there's potential that he could be pulling what Robert Downey Jr. is doing and playing a different character. But it's interesting, 2 years ahead of time, they've already announced that he's coming back.
Yeah, and they're, for whatever reason, they seem to be doing a complete 180 where everything was under close lock and key, and now it feels like they're just letting this stuff slip significantly before to maybe, I don't know, drum up interest. Not that they ever really have any trouble drumming up interest for almost anything they put out. It's always very highly talked about and, just making tons of money. But, we last saw Chris Evans reprises Johnny Storm character in the Deadpool and Wolverine film, and
they kept that under wraps.
Yeah, they kept that under wraps, which brilliant, absolutely brilliant. One of my favorite parts of that film. But it kind of, I'm starting to see a little bit more backlash from Marvel fans, where you have a huge group of people that are excited for like Robert Downey Jr. to come back as Doctor Doom. Now you got the announcement of Chris Evans returning to Marvel in some capacity. Like, a lot of people are getting upset based on the fact that it feels like Endgame and the lead up to Endgame was kind of all for naught, with like these incredible endings that these characters were given in those films, especially Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, who made the ultimate sacrifice and got everything back to normal and helped defeat Thanos. And, there's a large swelling of animosity towards like bringing these guys back. It's like, well, how are we supposed to get emotionally invested in these characters now when we were so invested in the story you just gave us? Like, we're supposed to accept that these guys are coming back in slightly different roles or different variants. It's wondering if it's a step too far, maybe.
Yeah, you've got to wonder how they're going to handle this, because Endgame was pretty huge for both Iron Man and with Captain America, Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, that they had some really fitting, solid endings and stuff. And now you've got them both back. And here we also got, which this one isn't as big because his character is still around. We also left a little bit on a cliffhanger because of the third eye that he got in the second Doctor Strange movie, that Benedict Cumberbatch is returning for Avengers Doomsday as well. But we also got confirmation that Haley Atwell is going to return as Peggy Carter. So again, we don't know if she's just going to be Peggy Carter, if she could be Captain Britain again, exactly, or Captain Carter, exactly who she might be playing as well. But I mean, that's kind of big that you announce that Peggy and Steve are both back in here, because they also revealed that they were working on a solo film that would have featured Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter. I'm guessing maybe would have filled in that gap after Endgame of when he went back, and they actually, between him returning all the stones and becoming an old man, it would fit in there, but they couldn't get the story right. But it's interesting they were even going forward with that.
Yeah, and it's one loose end that I'm surprised they never really got a ton of resolution to. You kind of get the allusion to it at the end of Endgame, where it's like, okay, he did go back and got to live that life with Peggy that he never really got to live because of what happened in the first Cap film. But yeah, it goes to speak to, with the whole, I know they're potentially going away from the multiverse after all this is done, and then this is maybe another way to kind of cash in on, bankable actors that you had had in these previous films, but at the same time, it's like, does that lessen the emotional weight of the stories you had already told and how special they were? And it's a good conversation to have, because these guys are coming back as different variants, and if you're as nerdy as we are and have read a bunch of these comics where there's an alternate version of Tony Stark that becomes Doctor Doom, so that could potentially be he's not necessarily Victor Von Doom, he's Tony Stark who becomes Doctor Doom kind of thing. And, there's different variations of evil, like iterations of like Captain America who's Captain Hydra. It's like a whole what if situation, right? Where, what if he worked for Hydra instead of being Captain America and was the good guy that we all know him as. And there's potential for fun stories there, but at the same time, I get the backlash and I get why people are like feeling the type of way that they're feeling about it, because they gave these guys incredible endings to their stories that we don't normally get, and they've really stuck the landing with both of these guys, and they're going back to the well, and it's just like, does it matter as much anymore? Like, can we get emotionally invested? And it's a good conversation to have about these things, because we love these movies as much as we do, but now if it means nothing, how are we supposed to stay invested in the story you're trying to tell?
Yeah, and a lot of people have felt when Robert was announced that, okay, this is just kind of a cash grab. They know it people are going to flock to the theaters to see Robert back in the MCU and see exactly what they do. But I'm hoping that they do something good with it. Maybe those ideas that they had for the Captain America spinoff film, maybe it'll be some flashbacks or something else that they include, that they're going to have him return, which you wouldn't think that they'd be announcing both of them this early if it was for a small little scene, because we know we already got a Peggy Carter funeral in one of the Captain Americas or one of the Avengers films that we saw, him say goodbye. Is it going to be, now maybe saying goodbye to Captain America, but is it worth bringing him back just for a funeral or something? Or is he, do we see him return as Johnny Storm again and they do a different version than, because we know what happened in Deadpool and Wolverine if you watched it. He can't bring that version back, but is there a different version, or is he playing Nomad? Is he doing the Captain? I think the most interesting one would be to do the Captain America Hydra agent, give that darker storyline. So if you are going with the Tony Stark Doctor Doom, so you've got the darker Tony Stark, you get a darker Steve Rogers, and so you kind of got Avengers versus Avengers almost, because they're going up against a darker variant of them. That could be an interesting take, but we'll see exactly where they go. But like 2 years ago, they don't film until next year. It is just kind of really strange that they're making all these casting announcements like that. Like, you figure maybe Benedict Cumberbatch is fine, but those who have had an ending or have a stopping point in the MCU already announcing them coming back is just, I don't know how to feel about that.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They feel like they're starting to right the ship on the Marvel side a little bit, so we'll see if, they bring it back around and kind of give us, something that makes it. If it's entertaining and it's a good story and it's leading to something and it has consequences, at the end of the day, I'm probably going to be all for it, but I get the discourse around it because, like you said, these were so well done and so well told, and we were so invested for over a decade in these stories that I get why people feel the way they do about them coming back, and it's just like, I get both sides of it, because you want to be able to like tell stories with these guys, but we'll see how they do with it. We got about 2 years to see what they come up with, and hopefully it pays off for us.
And of course, there's a lot of mixed reactions from after Endgame to now, because the last couple phases have been kind of okay in most people's eyes. They've had some decent hits, but they've had a lot that people felt like, all right, they're just kind of phoning it in, or they haven't done as well as they should with a lot of these shows and films. So that's where even more apprehension is on the fans. Like, well, you haven't shown us in the last few years that you really know or have a feel of what you're going to do. So how are you going to do this right? So their legacy of what happened in Game and Infinity War isn't ruined by them just showing up again.
Yeah, and we'll see where they go. Like I said, it feels like they're trying to right that ship, and we'll see what they wind up giving us. But I'll tell you who hasn't righted the ship, and that's Sony, and that's their mess of a Spider-Verse right now. But they have confirmed that Kraven the Hunter is the last of their Spider-Man spinoffs for now. I know they're focusing on the Spider-Man Noir show, but this has been kind of a less than stellar offering from Sony. It feels like they didn't really hit off on these Spider-Man properties until they teamed up with the MCU, but it does feel like Kraven's kind of the end of this, Spider-Verse, if you will, for now.
It's kind of crazy how the live action ones they've done have been mostly terrible. I mean, they came out defending that Morbius was profitable and made them money, but I don't know if that's the best defense for them. Oh yeah, one of them made money.
Yeah.
Like in the Venom films, they made money, but it was also, they're not the best, but they were entertaining enough. But I think that's where they kind of got hung up on is Venom, because it even came out saying that after the first Venom, they were like, oh, we don't need to have Spider-Man in there, because it was confirmed they weren't blocked from using Spider-Man in any of Madam Web and Kraven and Morbius of any of the Venom films. They were not blocked from using Spider-Man. They just chose, because of how well the first Venom film did, that we weren't going to include him at all, which just, it boggles my mind. You have all these Spider-Man villains and adjacent characters and everything else, and you just decided you weren't going to use them at all.
Which is crazy, because it's easily your most bankable star, right? Like it's your most bankable character. You're clearly not crowdsourcing. You're not listening to people who have input on your movies or have, feedback that they want to give, where they're literally like, it's great that you have Venom. We want to see Venom interact with Spider-Man, because who is Venom's Venom most synonymous with? Spider-Man. Like, why are they not interacting? Why are you not having Spider-Man show up in these movies? You make kind of these offhanded allusions to Spider-Man being around in the movies, especially like Madam Web, which was the most egregious, like as close as you can get without physically having Spider-Man in your film. Like it's been a hot mess, and that's the best way I could describe it, because there is some decent stuff in there. Like, I really enjoyed the first Venom film. Venom 2 and 3 were just kind of all right. You'll see what we think about Kraven the Hunter when we get there, but Madam Web, you know how we feel about Madam Web if you listen to us talk on this podcast. Easily my least favorite film of the year so far that we've seen, but it's kind of nice that they're putting it to bed now. I kind of just wish, and I think a lot of people do wish, that Sony would just sell the movie rights to Disney and Marvel and kind
or
of
themselves.
take it. Yeah, there's been rumblings that, you know, Disney has tried to buy Sony before, and there's been some issues with that, maybe because of the Fox purchase. I'm not entirely sure how all of that is interconnected, but I get why they're reluctant to give them away because it's bankable property, but do you drive that into the ground so much that it doesn't become profitable for you anymore? And it's one of those things that you get why they hold on to it, but at the same time, like, live action's just not hitting. It's just not doing well. Now, the end of the Spider-Verse animated features, absolutely fantastic.
I say their biggest films that have made the most money feature Spider-Man with both the Spider-Verse films so far.
Brilliant. And it's just, it's baffling that they couldn't make that work. And I don't know if it was not wanting to pay Tom Holland even more and have him appear in more films. You could have even gone your own way and picked a different Spider-Man.
That's apparently what they're talking about now. Yeah. So they're talking that they may, after they're done with Spider-Man 4, with Beyond the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Noir, they may cast a brand new Spider-Man to do more Spider-Man stuff on their own without Marvel. So you could have Tom Holland still playing Spider-Man in the MCU while they have their own, but you still have, you know, Toby and Andrew that are going to show up that we've heard, and potentially Doomsday Secret Wars, I think, is the one that's more known that they're going to appear in. But it just shows just kind of how disconnected with a lot of stuff they are, because they're doing, like, even with all these films, like, there's very little to no connection between Morbius and Madam Web and Kraven and Venom. Like, they're all pretty much
in their own boxes.
Yeah, in their own boxes. But they've connected it to the MCU because we've had them show up, because we've had Andrew and Toby show up. We had Venom, you know, Tom Hardy's Venom show up just for a second at the, you know, bonus extra credit scene. But you've had it connected. But then, as we'll talk about with Kraven, you have multiple MCU actors who are showing up in all these different properties. Venom 3, Kraven, like, all of them have featured people who are playing roles in the MCU. So it's like just a big confusing bubble of what are they doing. So I'm kind of glad it's stopping for now, but we'll see what happens when they pick it back up. And maybe before they pick it back up, Disney does make a move and brings it back, because it's been talked about a lot. There's two things that have basically kept Sony afloat for a while. That's PlayStation and that's Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the video game space, they're one of the kings of, you know, between them, Nintendo, and Microsoft with Xbox. Like, that's kind of the three heavy hitters in that industry. And, you know, the PlayStation has been the best-selling consoles for a couple generations now, and it's really going to be interesting to see what they do with this movie property, because I agree that a live action break is needed for a while, like, to kind of just hit a soft reset. And if that involves casting somebody else as a different Spider-Man and kind of starting over, okay, but they have so much work to do to kind of get the goodwill of the people back, as far as, like, wanting to care about these characters. I love Spider-Man. I'll always love Spider-Man. It's one of my favorite superheroes, but at the same time, it's like, I have zero faith in you to deliver a good story at this point, based on the last several offerings they've made. And if it's, you know, just as simple as, you kind of hope they do like what DC is trying to do with their creative, and, like, clearing everybody out, bringing in someone like James Gunn in, and then hopefully you can get somebody like that in to help with the Spider-Man stuff, because we want it to be good. We don't want it to be bad. Like, it's just not been good for a while.
I'm going to get the fanboys going crazy, because what if Sony decides to go to Zack Snyder and start their new Snyderverse in the Marvel realm?
Send all your hate comments to @Brad
Josh.
Covey on Twitter and all the things and Facebook.
Damn.
When you throw Zack Snyder around, everybody just I can hear the keys clacking on people's keyboards right now. But
And this isn't even like
But I see what you're saying though, getting that kind of like creative cohesion and like coming up from like a one collective mindset as opposed to like 800 hands in the cookie jar, which it kind of feels like what you've got with Sony right now.
Yeah, so. We've seen that with Sony. We've seen that with Star Wars, with episodes. The last few, the main episodes that it just seemed like everybody had their hands in it and nobody knew what the other person was doing. We've seen it with Marvel. Yeah, they got a little too disjointed with stuffs, and Sony's like, yeah, none of these movies really matter to each other, but we've got this big universe going. Like, okay, then what doesn't matter? Like, you see, yeah, there's a lot of change, I think, that needs to happen with all these studios that they really need to look back of. And take better. We just want better care of the characters. Like we just want the characters to be done right. Like you have all these Spider-Man characters and no Spider-Man, and the ones that we're still getting in the MCU, and then we got in the Sonyverse, we've repeated a lot. So I mean, I love seeing Green Goblin return and all the characters return in the last Spider-Man film, but you know we've had Lizard and Green Goblin and Doc Ock, and we haven't. I mean, we got a tiny bit of Vulture, which Vulture showed up in the Sonyverse too with Morbius. And so like we've got so much that we're just not getting, because even Sony was talking about doing their Sinister Six movie, but again, that would more than likely not have featured Spider-Man. So how do you have a Sinister Six movie without Spider-Man? Like what's going to be the thing that brings that whole universe together? Like it just, it needs a reset. They need to go back to the drawing board. They need someone else in control of these films to kind of do better with it, because you know the original Tobey Maguire, at least the first two Spider-Man film, were some of the best superhero movies ever made.
Facts.
And then they jumped into the Andrew Garfield, which I loved him as Spider-Man, but the movies were not that good at all. I mean, they had their moments,
they were good,
but it wasn't that well, especially like I liked Electro a whole lot better when Jamie Foxx showed up in the MCU and they made change to the character than what he was in Andrew Garfield's verse. But there is a lot of change that needs to happen with Sony's Spider-Verse films here to try to get them better, because they've nailed it in the animation realm. They just can't get the live action correct.
It drives me nuts too. It's funny you mentioned the Sinister Six stuff, because that was one of my biggest gripes, that they never really paid off, and that would have been a great way to bring everything together, right? I was talking to my buddy Eric about this the other day, and that he echoed the same thing, and it was like, you know, it was so frustrating because they had it right there. Mm-hmm. They were getting there, and then for whatever reason, they just decided to not follow up on it and just give us a bunch of these individual stories and not a way to bring it together. Like, you had a bankable potential story there for all of these villains to kind of come together and make this Sinister Six film, which had the potential to be very good, but it's just another miss on Sony's part where they were just like, nah, we're not going to do anything.
And it's not
we'll
like
tease it, but we're not going to pay it off.
It's not like you had small names. Like you had a lot of big name actors and actresses tied to these films, and they just dropped the ball on them.
Sony, do better.
And as we mentioned, speaking of another company that's trying to do better with DC, you know, but this is also touching on the point, are they going to have too many problems with having stuff separate? Because James Gunn has his DCU, but they also have the other side where they're doing a bunch of stuff. Like, I'm super excited for this film after they announced it, but it's also one that, again, that's DC's kind of running two lines of storylines right now, because we got confirmation that they are working on a live-action Clayface film. You got Mike Flanagan, who did Dr. Sleep, Midnight Mass, a bunch. He's also working on a Carrie and another Exorcist. Yeah. So he's working with a lot of horror. He pitched this back in 2021. He wanted to do a horror tragedy based on Clayface. And the thing that got me the most excited is when he mentioned his inspiration was Batman the Animated Series. And that has always been, to me, like, if I've talked about wanting a villain done in live action, I've wanted Clayface done in the vein of Batman the Animated Series, because they made him a sympathetic character. He was a tortured actor who got this done, and he struggled with right and wrong and what to do with it. And it was a big struggle, and that's what they're going with. They're doing a horror tragedy where he's not exactly a villain. They're doing he's a guy who's going to be struggling with what this deformation and stuff that's happening, and I am all for that. I mean, you've got a great person in Mike Flanagan writing it. We don't know who's going to be directing it, but it's already greenlit to move forward in 2025 to film and release in 2026.
I'm so excited for this because I've always said I feel like Batman has the best rogues gallery of villains. There's so many different ones with amazing backstories, and like what I love about them is like you can kind of empathize and hate them at the same time. Like that's what's so good about all the villains that he has. Like there's ones where like, okay, I understand how this person could turn bad on this. I understand where they're coming from here. Like a lot of them have tragic events that really lead them to becoming the villains that they are. And Clayface is a great one that you could tell on screen. And I love the fact that, you know, he's using the animated series version of it, because I agree with you. Like, we've talked here many times about how Batman the Animated Series is among our favorite, not only, like, comic book properties, but, like, just one of our favorite cartoons growing up. Was
so
absolutely
done.
brilliant. I go back to this day and still, like, rewatch old episodes of that. When I've got, you know, something I want to throw on in the background, I'll throw a Batman the Animated Series episode on. Like, I've watched it with some friends recently, and we're just talking like, man, it just holds up so well to this day, because the nuanced storytelling was beyond its time when it came out 30 years ago, and it's still good to this day. Like, you could still go back and really identify with it. And Clayface has always been one of those really intriguing characters that they did so well. So I'm really excited that he's basing it off of that, because Clayface is a villain that has potential for some real fun that you could do with a story like in live action, because he has the ability to kind of shapeshift and become other things, and has this unbelievably like heartbreaking story that kind of you can really play into now with like cosmetic surgery and things like that. A lot of real social commentary can go into this film if you wanted to, and the opportunities are endless for a character like this. And I'm excited that they're going forward with it, and we'll see what they give us.
Yeah, I'll never stop praising Batman the Animated Series, because it wasn't your typical children's show. Like, it was dark, it was dramatic, it dealt with some real subject matter, it had some real depth to it, had some silliness and over the topness too, but it had a lot of heart and depth. And Clayface was one that I loved ever since watching that series because of that. He was a dark, sympathetic character. Even though he was a villain, he was someone you could connect to, and you see like he's just a guy who's struggling with everything. Of course, in there they made it, what was it, he was using this makeup compound to try to help him stay younger and look for the movies, but it started seeping in and causing him to change. And yet doing it in a horror tragedy, like, that's a character. You can have some crazy body deformations, and you can have him, you could even have some fun with having him transform into other characters and other people and stuff. But taking a serious route, like, I think because this is going to be produced by Matt Reeves, so he is involved in it. So we don't know exactly if this is official within the Matt Reeves Batverse character or not, because there's been, you know, a lot of talk that he wants to stay more grounded with the villains and the characters. The Batman, now they're doing Clayface, like, he's one that's not exactly grounded because of everything he does, but it can be done in such a serious, dark, dramatic way. So if they do this in the vein of Penguin, of being able to take a character that you could potentially hate, but make him sympathetic. But, you know, I don't think you're going to hate Clayface as much as you hate the Penguin, especially towards the end of the series. But they could do something really good, making it a horror tragedy, making him a very sympathetic character and everything. And yeah, having Batman the Animated Series be the driving force behind his script and what he wrote for it, is, I was hooked from that moment. It's like, yep, I was going to see it no matter what, but now that you say that that's the inspiration, because that's one of my favorite versions of the character, I'm like, okay, I'm there. Please do it right.
Definitely looking forward to that when it comes out, for sure. I want to kind of move over to our next story, which is kind of really affecting both of us, for sure, because we both subscribe to the service. But we get another announcement from YouTubeTV, who have been steadily increasing prices over the last couple of years. Like, you know, the running gag is everything's getting more expensive, right? We're all aware of this, but YouTubeTV did announce this week that they're raising the price of their service again, up to $83 a month, beginning in January. And it's really speaking to a lot of people's issues with, you know, streaming now. Is it's getting so expensive that you have to kind of pick and choose what you want to pay for. And this is getting to the point where now it's just as expensive, if not more so, than cable television, which was kind of the whole point of them starting streaming services, was to be a more affordable alternative. But now it's just becoming on the same level as cable television at this point.
Yeah, it's made it to where cable and satellite is, and even cable and satellite have some cheaper options than YouTube TV now, because I think the DirecTV Stream is like 40 or 50 a month, so they've surpassed them. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. They launched in 2017 as an alternative. Cable and satellites got too expensive. Come to YouTube TV, $35 a month. 7 years later, you're almost up to $1,000 a year for TV again, and it's gotten out of control. Hulu is about the same; it's about 83. The only one that's still kind of low is Sling TV, which they have two different deals, so you can do the orange and the blue, or you can bundle them together for like $55 a month. But they also have some caveats where you get a limited amount of storage space and you have to pay extra. But even YouTube TV, if you want 4K stuff, you have to pay extra. There's a lot of extras that they tag in, but the biggest problem I've had with all of it, with cable, satellite, now streaming TV becoming exactly like it, is the fact that they keep losing channels and raising the prices.
Yep.
Like as Reds fans, we lost Fox Sports and Bally Sports a while ago from YouTube TV. We lost MLB Network. There's a lot of networks and stuff that have left, and they keep raising the prices. Like, how can you lose 10, 15, 20, 30 channels and continue to raise the price on it? Like, where's the value? Like, it's a value for you, but not a value for us. I mean, of course, they're owned by Google, who is looking to have like $200 billion in revenue next year, and there are $100 billion in revenue, $200 million in revenue for YouTube TV. So they've been in the red for a little bit now for YouTube TV. They have been losing money on it, but I don't know how they think that raising up to $83 now is going to help them. A lot of people started leaving Netflix and other streaming services because they went up to $20 a month, and now they're up to $83 a month. I think they're going to have a pretty massive exodus of people leaving them because it's just not the choice anymore. Like, I enjoy the service. I think it has one of the better interfaces. You have the unlimited DVR and stuff with it, but it's become like, I watch broadcast TV and I watch ESPN and the SEC network and a few other things, but it's becoming where I'm losing so many channels. Where's the value for it to be $83 now?
Yeah, and that's the difficult part of it, because as a lot of us get busier with life and other things like that, it's hard to watch things live in real time sometimes outside of sports. Like, using the DVR function is probably the one thing that's kept me on the service, only because I can go back and watch, kind of binge watch a few shows, but at the same time that lends itself to being available for streaming, right? And in a lot of TV shows cases, they're available on the streaming service the next day for the shows that you want to watch regularly, that you don't need to watch time, like in real time. Like, something live like a sports programming is one thing to pay for, but at the same time, if you're watching like scripted shows that you can kind of go back, and if you're comfortable waiting a day or two, it usually shows up on the streaming service the next day. There's a few exceptions for shows like really popular shows like Yellowstone that are on some cable networks that may not be available on streaming the next day, but a lot of the regular network shows are. Like, you can watch, I'll just use an example, NCIS. I believe you can watch the episode that airs on Monday on Tuesday on Paramount.
Which of the 766 versions of NCIS?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them. But like, using that as an example, like, if you don't watch it Monday night at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock or whenever the heck it's on, like, you can watch it the next day or go back and watch it whenever you want. Like, I use the DVR service to kind of collect all of the shows that I watch, that I have recording, and tend to watch them a couple days later or on the weekend when I get a little more time. But it's not maintaining that value. The more you continue to raise the price just becomes not worth it at that point.
Yeah, especially if you're watching everything DVR, then okay, then let's look at the streaming services that offer that and see if I can wait just to watch it on the streaming service that I may already be paying for. Because if you look at it, like, if you have, say, about 4 streaming services and YouTube TV, that's going to be like $200 a month, because they're getting close. Netflix, if you get the top tier with 4K, is like 21, 22, 23 dollars a month. You know, Disney Plus is up to about 15 now, so they're all getting around the $20. So, you know, you get 4 to 5, and you're already at $100 there, and there's 300 different streaming services. Where's the value that YouTube TV has now that they've upped their price so much? And it does seem like this price hike was related to them getting the NFL Red Zone, which isn't included. It'll cost you almost $400 to get NFL Red Zone for the year. But you know, I'm a big football fan, but I've never paid for it. I don't want to pay for it. So why am I also paying for it when it also needs to be paid for? Like that, because of what they paid to get that available on their services, well, that's being passed off to the customer now. But you also still have to buy it.
Yeah, and the other issue that you run into now is like even Disney Plus now is offering ESPN live streaming of TV now. Like you've got live stuff that you can watch if you have Disney Plus, right? You can get ESPN stuff on it. You can get, like, if you're hang up at sports and live TV at that point, you can get that. You get, you know, I know Paramount has live programming on it as well. Like all of these other streaming services are doing it. So it's looking less and less viable to keep one of these live TV services the more these other streaming services are bundling stuff, and you can kind of just go back and watch whatever you want whenever you want it, and that's kind of the swinging point that we're getting to, and we wanted to include it just because we're both YouTube TV subscribers, but this goes for any other live TV service that you use as well. Like it's becoming less and less affordable for everybody, and it's just kind of pricing everybody out of the market. Where it's like, okay, well now more people are becoming comfortable just having one or two streaming services, and kind of I know people that like just have one or two and rotate them. Like, hey, if I want to watch this, I'm going to cancel this for a month and just pay for this so I can watch this, and then I'll go back to that and watch stuff if you want. And that's how people are starting to consume their content now. And it's going to be an interesting case study to see what happens in a couple years when everybody decides to cut the streaming cord as well for like services like that are not as viable or affordable as they should be. And I get it. It's a business. You're trying to make money and all that. But at some point, you're going to lose a huge chunk of your client base because you're going to price a lot of them out of the market, and that's the reality of what we're facing.
And you got now the password crackdowns that are starting with Netflix and Disney and everything else that you can no longer, to try to offset some of the costs, share with somebody else, which YouTube TV you can for now. You can set up a family group and you could, split that and share that, but you're also very limited because they only allow 3 screens active at one time. So you can't share, go in with too many other people because then people are getting kicked off from watching it because they only allow up to 3, but they're cutting down, they're raising the prices and everything. They're not allowing you to share anymore, which I've mentioned before, it still affects me when I'm sharing in my own household with Netflix because I have some devices wired and some wireless, and it doesn't see them both as on the same network. So if I watch on one of the wired devices and someone else in the house is trying to watch it on one of our streaming sticks or Apple TV, it has to be changed. They have to change the household to be for them, and then that disconnects me, and it causes an issue. I'm paying money to watch your services, and I have to jump through hoops to be able to watch it, and it's really starting to get ridiculous that the streaming is costing a ton of money. Streaming TV is costing a ton of money. We're spending way too much money to be able to watch all your shows. Like I said, there's 10, 15 main streaming services out there that I don't think any of them really have a $10 tier anymore. They're all $10 or higher, $15, $14 and higher. And now you've got the TV services, minimum $50 a month if you go to Sling TV. So they're pricing themselves out again. They saw cable and satellite were kind of crashing, burning, having a really hard time, and they're already back up to that.
Yeah, and it's really going to affect people because, if people have to start being more choosy of what they pay for, you're going to lose a lot of people. And then at the same time, how do they offset that? They make everything more expensive. Mm-hmm. So it's a double-edged sword, man. And it's a really fine line that, they got to walk and they got to watch. And it feels like all of these, and this is a broader, I don't want to get too, bring too much real-world stuff into this, but it feels like that's where everything is going, right? Like they're seeing how far they can push prices on everything.
Yep. And it's just really unfortunate, especially for those who life is hard paying for everything as it is, and it's I could
go on a long tangent about, how much people make and don't make and how everything's going up in costing and like our financial situations aren't raising to meet that everywhere. And it's just
unless
really
you're CEO of a company
who can make millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and then, enjoy your 1 or 2% raise you get that's not even enough to cover how expensive everything's getting.
We got to cancel all these shows. We got to lay people off, but I'm getting a $15 million a year raise.
Yep. Love that. Love that for you. But yeah, that's just
yeah, we could go on a long rant on
but
it.
I think we need to move away from this into our next story.
Especially like the entertainment industry it's kind of struggling too because budgets are going out of control with the productions and they're not spending as much time. Like some shows that they may give a season or two are getting canceled after 2 episodes. So yeah, there's a lot of change when it comes to streaming media, and they went all in on streaming, and it's costing them more than they thought it was. So there's probably some big changes coming here in the next few years.
Yeah, you gotta keep an eye on that for sure.
So heading over to Disney, so we got Deadline reporting that Disney is moving forward with a live-action Tangled film. So, they've been doing the live-action bit for a while. They've been okay. I can't think of any of their live-action adaptations that have been like fully stellar, like fantastic, great that you want to run out. We know we've got Snow White coming next year that's had a lot of controversy to it and stuff. Tangled is one that could be really interesting. I know a lot of people just have Mandy Moore come back, which of course, because of her age, maybe she'll be the mom of, Rapunzel and stuff. We don't know exactly with what's going on with Zachary Levi, if he could reprise his role and play the dad or something, because he's had a lot of controversy online and social media and some of his comments and stuff, and also with his films and other things not doing as well. So it's going to be interesting to see who they cast, because supposed to be teenagers and very young, so they got to go a little bit younger with that. But that could be one that could be really fun. I could see them doing something really interesting with it, but they haven't changed the stories all too much when they've gone to the live action versions of these properties.
Yeah, and I get why they try it. It hasn't always yielded the best success. I know Snow White, people have had very strong opinions one way or another on it, and you're going to have that for any classic animated feature that you try to bring into the real life, into live action. It's always going to be met with a very cynical, can't do that, don't do that, versus oh, I'm excited, I think it's going to be great. You have hits and misses on both ends, but I'm definitely willing to give it a chance and give it the benefit of the doubt. Tangled is a pretty solid Disney film. I don't think it would rank in too many people's upper tier as far as favorites go, but the potential is there for a decent story because it's not as whimsical, fantastical, over the top as some of the other animated features that they've done. Obviously, they're going forward with Moana next year, which is another one to keep an eye on. As far as bringing live action to things, I know you're wearing the sweater for it. Lilo and Stitch is getting a live action-ish kind of a film next year as well. So they're taking more risks on it. I'm all for it if they can do it in a way that's entertaining and telling good stories and things like that. But you do take these things that are so beloved in the animated form and making live action versions of them. It's very fine line to walk, whether it winds up being good or bad, but this is one that we could keep an eye on for sure.
Well, the biggest positive for the live-action Tangled film is they have Michael Gracie, who directed The Greatest Showman, in talks to helmet. And The Greatest Showman is one of my favorite musical films. It's one of my favorite films as well. It's got such great music, but it was such very beautifully shot, very well done. This is going to be a musical film. You're going to have plenty of songs and stuff. So have someone like him who did so well with The Greatest Showman at the helm could bode really well for this to be something big, and maybe Wicked-wise. You got John Chu, who came into Wicked, and because he was known for a lot of stuff outside of musicals and stuff, and he came in and did a fantastic job. Look at our review of Wicked if you want to see what we thought on it. But you have someone who's already done a stellar musical to take on a more musical film for Disney. It could bode really well for him. That's leaving a lot of positivity for me because they potentially have him at the helm.
Yeah, and Greatest Showman's fantastic and brilliant and amazing soundtrack and stuff. I'd pump the brakes on comparing it to Wicked necessarily, who's still doing incredibly gangbusters at the box office right now. But we'll see. We'll see how they do, because it's a mixed bag every time you put one of these out. We're actually getting ready to do, The Lion King next week that I'm looking forward to. People have very mixed opinions on that as well, the Mufasa film. But, it's... You walk a fine line when you do these Disney properties live action that people come with some very strong opinions on. I love the fact that they got that director to be a part of this as well because he did such a good job with it. That leaves me hope for it could potentially be on the good side of the line versus the bad. But time's going to tell. You just never know when you get these things. Like, the casting's got to be on point. The story's got to look good. It's got to, it's got to be done well. And, you get such a mixed bag out of these, you just don't know what side of the line it's going to fall on.
And Marcel and my wife would agree, Tangled has probably one of the worst villains when you really look at it with Mother Gothel, because
Absolutely.
she is such a horrendous, horrible woman. And so you've got to really, I think, past Rapunzel and Flynn and stuff, you have to get that right actress to do Mother Gothel right, because you need to loathe her and hate her and despise her because she is a pretty wicked, terrible woman. And yeah, you need the right actress to pull. And that, to me, might be the first one you go to. You got to get that Mother Gothel and then see who's going to be your Rapunzel to play off of her.
Can we get the woman that played Skylar White in Breaking Bad, please? Because I absolutely despise that woman.
The internet hates her.
Yes, let's have her be Mother Gothel. I'm in, all in, full send. She's an amazing actress and a fantastic person. I joke, but that character, she can channel that into Mother Gothel. Perfect casting. That would be amazing. But yeah, looking forward to that for sure. Another one that I'm looking forward to. It's one that kind of came out of left field, and Disney kind of blindsided a lot of people because I don't think anybody really heard about it, but Disney's moving forward with kind of a Malcolm in the Middle soft, I don't want to call it a soft reboot, but almost like a continuation of sorts for like a special set of episodes on Disney Plus that you've got, Bryan Cranston, Frankie Muniz, Jane Kaczmarek all coming back for this show. But this was one that I was kind of, gobsmacked by when I heard the news. I was like, they announced this? Like, they kept this completely under wraps as far as I was aware.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting because you've seen a lot with Frankie and Brian, like reuniting and seeing each other and talking about each other, about how, if Frankie had something going on, whether his band was doing something or had a movie or something else came out, Brian was there and he was there driving cars. Like, Brian's been showing up and like being a dad to him still, like being there for a lot of stuff. There's a video where Frankie showed up, I think, at one of his birthday celebrations at a table, and he just looked absolutely elated to see him and stuff. So there's been a big connection there, and we've seen a lot of stories, but we didn't expect that. Oh yeah, that means Malcolm in the Middle's coming back. It's supposed to be just like a 4-episode like mini series, basically. They did release some details that it's going to be about Malcolm's daughter, but also about the 40th wedding anniversary for Hal and Lois. So it could be really interesting. Only 4 episodes.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you can really tell in 4. We don't know if it's going to be 30-minute. If they're gonna up it up to an hour to get a little more story out of it, but it's gonna be really interesting. It was a huge show, and that's kind of the big thing right now, is to bring as much stuff back from the past as they possibly can to do some reunion shows, and hopefully it's done good. If they've got, especially, I know Bryan Cranston's a little more picky with what he does and stuff, especially after Breaking Bad and how big that was for him. He's earned it. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they pull this off, and to do it directly on Disney Plus instead of taking it back onto Fox or something else. Like, hopefully it's good for the fans. I watched Malcolm in the Middle. I didn't watch the entire series. I watched bits and pieces of it, but it was a fun, entertaining show. And to have them come back after so long, it's going to be kind of really interesting to see if we also get the brothers and who else we get to come back, because we've got the 3 big, but you've got quite a lot more cast to potentially bring back.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with it, too. I enjoyed the show as well. I wasn't like a diehard fan of it, but that show had a very hardcore, loyal fan base that kept that show alive for quite a while on Fox, and it did really well. And I'm interested to see how they tell this story, because I was not prepared for them to announce this. Like, they were like, oh, yeah, we got these 4 episodes. Not only that, they've been I'm pretty sure they've shot the entire thing already, and it's getting ready to...
They have.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to see that's like coming back and doing, like, they're doing this and they're doing it in a limited fashion, which I kind of like. Like, if you're gonna do it, do like a little short mini, like just a little something for people, like 3 or 4 episodes. It could be perfect way to, kind of get that nostalgic kick, but not like do too much with it. I think it's an interesting case study to see if they do this, if they're more willing to lean into other things as well. Does it lead into it? Who knows? But the fact that we got that at all was just mind-boggling to me. I wouldn't have guessed it on 20 TV shows. You could have told me it had gotten something like this. I never would have guessed it.
And we talked about it last episode that Scrubs is coming back after 22. You know, it ended in 2002. You know, Disney, Fox, if you're listening, another property that ended 2002, Firefly. Let's get it going again. Come on. I'm not going to give up on that.
I love that for you.
Firefly, Browncoats. Come on, let's go.
The fact that it only got one, that, and I'll throw my honorable mention, and it's Freaks and Geeks, was another, like, go, if you've never seen or heard of Freaks and Geeks, go look that show up and look at the cast that it had on it. It was a TV show that was only on for one season. It was just, the cast is insane on that show, and the fact that it only got one season is a crime.
Yeah, there's so many good shows that just barely even got a full season. They were canceled before their season even ended, and they were fantastic. Like, both of those, Firefly and Freaks and Geeks, were just brilliant shows that just didn't get their... I mean, Firefly went on to get a movie. I don't think Freaks and Geeks ever got anything else. Maybe we'll see Freaks and Geeks get some sort, but of course they're going to have to bring it up to modern day and stuff with it too. But yeah, there's some good shows that just... You're seeing a lot of shows that had their run come back. Like, what about those shows that didn't get the proper run?
Well, I mean, and we'll see, but like we could do a whole episode on prematurely canceled TV shows that we could just talk about, like, just endless amounts of stuff that never got the love that it deserved or cut off way too soon. But yeah, that would be, it's definitely one to keep an eye on when it decides to air. So Malcolm in the Middle, crazy that it's getting an episode run on a 4-episode run on Disney Plus. So keep an eye on that if you're a fan of the show for sure. So now I want to move us on to our first film review of the week, which is Kraven the Hunter. It is the last, like we mentioned, it's one of the last versions in the Spider-Verse that we're going to see from Sony for the time being. But this is the story of, obviously, Kraven the Hunter, the title character, who is the son of, you know, this hunter, this poacher, who's like got this criminal organization that he runs. We're going to get into some kind of spoilery stuff in this. We don't feel like this film's going to do too incredibly well, but if you're wanting to see the film for yourself, just a warning now, we're going to talk about kind of the plot of the film and everything that kind of happens in it. If you don't want it spoiled for you, jump ahead to our next review and go to see the film, come back, and then listen to our review as well. But this is kind of an interesting story because you get kind of Kraven's origin story here, where he's, you know, coming up as the son of this guy who's the head of this criminal organization. He hunts. He's very masculine. He believes, you know, you
very
have to be
Russian
strength, you know, strong. Like, you're not allowed to show weakness, that kind of thing. And, you know, we are humans. We are the predators. That everyone else is the prey. Kind of machismo that he exudes, played by Russell Crowe, who, you know, in this limited role that he's given, does a fine job in my opinion. But you kind of get the story of how Kraven gains the abilities that he gains. So if you don't know who Kraven is, he has kind of like Captain America level, I would say, like speed and agility and an ability to jump, and kind of take some abuse, and, you know, has not necessarily a healing factor, but he's pretty...
Speaking like the evil Russian Captain America.
Yeah, more or less. Like, it's kind of... like, I'm trying to find the right person to compare him to, but that's kind of the most apt that I could give. It's almost kind of like a Black Panther meets Captain America kind of thing, as far as his ability to, like, run, jump, you know, like... Like, there's varying elements of both of those, obviously, without the suit that, you know, Black Panther wears, but... You know, it's a very interesting movie, and that's probably the best thing I could say about it.
Yeah, if you were expecting much after Madam Web and Morbius and everything else, you didn't get much better. Like, it wasn't... I think it's above Madam Web.
Sure.
It had some good action sequences. I think they did good with the fight. It went very graphic with the violence. Like, there was a lot of graphic violence, but I also think it relied too much on CGI. Like, when it switched to CGI, it's kind of like the original Spider-Man when, you know, it switches from Tobey Maguire walking around as Spider-Man and he's jumping off the buildings and it's clearly CG. It's almost back to that level for me for a lot of it. Like, it's very clear when you get the cut between, you know, Aaron Taylor Johnson being there and it being the CG version of him, because I think he did a fair job of with what he was given, but there's so much cringy dialogue. It's a joke that I can't stop saying because he sounded like a Valley girl. He sounded like a girl that's like, oh, it's Chrissy with a C or it's Chrissy with a K. He literally is sitting down talking with someone and he goes, my name's Kraven with a K. Why did we need that line of dialogue? Why do you need to say it's with a K? Is Kraven spelled any other way? Is Kraven used in any other way than with this name? And then literally his last name is Kravenoff with a K. So it's like that line stuck out to me more than anything because he did sound like a little Valley girl. It's Chrissy with a C or Chrissy with a K. No, it's Kraven with a K. Like, why? Why did we do that?
All Valley girls, send your hate comments to Brad Covey at
Bring it.
Anyway,
Bring it.
but you're right though. Like this film, like at the end of the day, it's just okay, right? It's not. The action is good. There's good action in the film. The fight scenes are really solid. You know, the action is fairly solid in it. The acting, the dialogue is subpar at best.
Mm-hmm. That's being generous.
And I think they did okay with what they were given. But it's just at the end of the day, we're kind of just like, what's the point? Like, what's the whole point of this? Because okay, he eventually gets, you know, sets off to do he's kind of being presented as this anti-hero, like this kind of he does dark villainous things, but he's not a villain, but he is a villain. Like it's walking that anti-hero line very much where like he's hunting bad people and he's doing vicious violent things to bad people for a good reason, I guess, but it's very much not a Frank Castle situation here. Like, I think they're trying to make him Frank Castle, like the Punisher, but it doesn't do as good a job, in my opinion, of that, because I get it. I get why he's going after these hunters, these poachers, because, you know, he's got these animalistic instincts that kind of take over him at times, and he's, you know, targeting these people that do these bad things, and he's ultimately trying to just get revenge on his dad. Who's kind of a jerk to him, and he kind of runs away at the beginning of the film and kind of grows up on his own and becomes this absolutely jacked, shredded, you know, hunter of just bad people. And I will give Aaron Taylor Johnson credit for one thing. He got in absolutely ridiculous shape for this film. I mean, this dude had like 8-pack abs, muscles on top of muscles. Like physically, he looked fantastic for the type of role that he was playing. Like he got in ridiculous shape for this movie, which good for him. I mean, you know, hats off to the work ethic that he has. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of a miss for me overall. Yeah. It's kind of a mess.
It was definitely a mess. Like, and it's also what I've talked about before is that these Sony films are MCU adjacent, so they're loosely connected, but they're Sony's own thing. Of course, Aaron Taylor Johnson was Quicksilver in Age of Ultron in the MCU. You have Russell Crowe was Zeus in Thor: Love and Thunder. You have multiple characters and actors that appear in the film that have been in other properties, just like with Venom: The Last Dance, they included several people who were in the MCU or other Sony movies, but they're not playing the same character. So they just have so many versions with these films with different actors that are in the MCU or in other Sony properties playing new people. And it was hard for me just to look at it in that way because you have with the multiverse started thinking about, okay, these guys are all interconnected, and you get that there could be alternate versions of them, but I mean, you're gone from Quicksilver to Kraven. You've gone from Zeus to a Russian drug lord and stuff. Like why did they decide to go back with actors that they've used before for other characters in the Sony Spider-Man verse, but also in the MCU for it? Because Russell Crowe did his best with it and everything. He's a great actor and stuff, but it's like, why? It was also, why do we need him as Zeus? Either Zeus was over the top and, you know, silly and crazy and that, but just having the same actors within these two universes that are somewhat interconnected without them being like multiverse versions of them is just kind of wild and crazy. And yeah, the dialogue was really bad. Like there was one part that we busted out laughing and it wasn't a funny moment. Like, so we get Rhino is kind of one of the big villains outside of his dad and stuff, and we get to learn that, you know, he kind of went to this doctor in New York that's mentioned by several different characters to have something done, but he has to kind of exist with this backpack on with this serum that keeps him from turning into the Rhino, and you know he's going after Kraven. And they're standing in the room, and one of his henchmen come up to tell him that we were unsuccessful with getting Kraven. And instead of responding with words, he screeched like an owl.
Yeah, just absolutely awful, right?
Ah! Like, wait, what just happened? Like, why is he screeching?
It's such a mess, man, and it's. But the fact that we have to go into such detail to kind of talk about whether it's connected, whether it's not, it just kind of goes to speak in the overall lack of quality storytelling that we've gotten from these movies, like especially the Sony ones, where it's like we want to do our own thing, but we kind of want to just like have a hand on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but we want to do our own thing.
We're not touching you. We're almost touching you, but we're not touching you.
Yeah, it's one of those like weird things and weird creative directions that they've gone with it. And it's a shame because, you know, Kraven, it can be an interesting character, right? He does become this pretty solid villain for Spider-Man. Like, you get all these great Spider-Man villains that you're giving these, you know, you're giving these films to, and you're just doing nothing with it. Like, it's, and that's kind of the issue that I take with it at the end, is that it's not really important to anything. Like, it's its own standalone film, which is fine. Like, it used to be that way, where like all of these guys just kind of had their own individual movies and you kind of moved on with it. But the fact that it's supposed to be tangentially connected to everything, but it's inconsequential, is where I struggle with it the most. It's like, why do I care about Kraven at the end of the day? Like, it's a neat story, I guess, where you're like, okay, like, he kind of eventually gets the revenge he sought out for by the end of the movie, and you get what I think people were hoping to see more of, and that's Kraven with the vest, with the staff, kind of like looking, you know, jacked out of his mind, and you really only get that shot at the end of the film. Like, you get nothing like that throughout the film, and it's I can't think of any other way to say it than it's just a mess, man.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's a mess of a movie, but like I say, it's just okay, because it's not the worst film I've seen. It's nowhere near the best film I've seen this year, but it's just all right. Like, I've had people like now that we've done this podcast for 50 episodes, which thank you for sticking with us, by the way. But like, I get people all the time when I go see films, and I talk to them because they know when we go and see movies, because I'm like, hey, you know, I'll seeing this on this day, and people like will message me or like talk to me, and they're like, hey, what'd you think of this? And you know,
and you tell them to wait till the episode comes out, right?
I always do. I always tell them to wait. They don't listen. They ask anyway. But like, it's like I was telling them, was like, it's just okay. Like, that's just how I've been describing this film to people. Like, it's just all right, which is fine. It's fine. Like, it's one that you should or could see it once. Not gonna watch it again, honestly. The repeatability for viewing this movie is just not very high.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest flaws, it started out pretty decent that you get Kraven and you know, we think he's going to prison because he's been arrested for something, but he's actually there to try to take out one of the prisoners, and we get some decent action, talking in Russian, we get all that. And then for the next almost 30 minutes, it's a flashback to him as a kid with his brother and his dad. So like, we start off kind of that high, and then it just wasn't as interesting as I think they wanted it to be, of giving his origin of how he got his powers, getting attacked, you know, by the lion and everything. But it was just the next 30 minutes was all flashbacks, because it's about a 2-hour movie. So when you think of a 2-hour movie and 30 minutes of it being without your main star and Aaron Taylor Johnson, you know, that's kind of a big problem. And it also had, like, they really wanted you to know the name of the girl in the movie, because we see her as a little girl. She's playing with tarot cards, and the mom is just like, Calypso. Hey, Calypso. Well, Calypso, you know what this card is? Because Calypso, this card is Calypso. Because this card is Calypso. Calypso, this card, yeah, well, you got to think of this card, Calypso. And it was just like repeating her name 10, 15 times.
He's only exaggerating.
Just so you know. Yeah, slight exaggeration. Like,
it's comic level.
Because it's only those two sitting next to each other. They could say it once or twice, and you know who the little girl is, but it's egregious how many times they said her name. Just Calypso, 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 Calypso. We get it. Her name's Calypso.
Send your hate comments to Bracken.
Send all the hate to me. Just send. No. But it was that kind of
saying.
ludicrous with this film. Like Kraven saying his name is Kraven with a K. Is there anybody else in the world named Kraven that he needs to explain? Because he didn't explain how to spell the rest of it. You have Calypso being repeated. You have the rhino screeching like an owl. Like, that's the mess. Like, there's just so much stuff that didn't make sense. The really only saving grace of this film was the action.
The action definitely raises it up from the dredges, I would say, because the action is, like, make no mistake, the action is really good in this movie. Like, there's some really good fight scenes and action going on in this, and that helps. But we're nitpicking a lot. The dialogue, one of my favorite things that just made me laugh is a lot of times he's just kind of talking with the really low, like, slow Russian like voice, and just kind of talking like that at times, and it's comical. Like, you're just like just talk. For the love of God, just use your words.
But also, speaking of the fact they speak English the whole time. Like, Kraven is, like, we know that he was sent to, like, boarding school in America and, like, through London and stuff, but they're Russian. Their dad's Russian. But neither of the brothers speak with a Russian accent ever. They're speaking with an English accent through the whole movie. Yeah,
and a lot of that's part of the upbringing, but they kind of just gloss over it, right?
It's kind of Black Widow, too. Yeah, she barely ever sounds like she's Russian.
Right. So I'm a little more forgiving on that necessarily, but it's just a miss, honestly, because there's potential there for a solid story, and I kind of see what they were trying to do. It's just, once again, the lack of execution, really. Like, the dialogue is not very good. The action, solid. Like, B to B plus action, I would say, in this movie. Like, they do that very well. It's just the rest of the substance of the story, if you're looking for that, is what kind of really drags this down for me, because, tie that in with the fact that it's connected, but it's not connected. I know we're kind of joking about that, but that's the best way I can describe it. Like, it's just messy. Like the one word I could use to describe it is messy. Like, and I keep coming back to it, but it's the most accurate way I could choose to describe this movie.
Yeah. So in the end, Kraven the Hunter, it's a mess. It has a lot of problem with dialogue, with the story. You don't fully get connected or care about this world because it's not connected to anything else Sony has done. It's not connected to MCU, but it's trying to act like it because you get the Daily Bugle and you get some other stuff in it. But, in the end, like, Aaron Taylor Johnson does his best with what he's given, but there's just so much cringy dialogue, so much stuff that goes wrong. In the end, I would probably give Kraven a 4. I think the only real saving grace of the movie was the action, but past that, there really wasn't a whole lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I give Kraven a 4 as well. That's where I wound up landing on it. Like, the action raises it up above where it could be, because if the action weren't as good, it would probably be close to Madam Web level, I would say, like that, and that's saying something, because I try to give a lot of these films the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, raising the action definitely raises it up a notch or two to where it's at least a tolerable movie. Like, I think you should go see it. I personally would say go see it and kind of see how you agree with it. If you're a fan of Aaron Taylor Johnson, he looks great. He's in great physical shape in this. He does fine with what he's given. There are some solid actors in this film, but there's just some really bad CGI in it. There's a meme going around about, the way Rhino looks in this film versus the way he's looked in other movies. And, there's just some really not good things in it as well. But for the action, I would bump it up to a 4 for sure.
He also didn't say it's Kraven time or Morbin time or anything. Come on.
I would have made it at least a 5 or 6.
Yeah, that would have given him 1 point.
Like, come on, man. We'd have throw that in there and we'd have been okay with it. But yeah, Kraven the Hunter is in theaters now. Go check it out and form your own opinion. If you think we're way off base on this, let us know in the comments. Come to our Discord, yell at us there. We'll gladly have that conversation with you. Comment on any of our social media posts. You'll see the reels that we put out through the week as well, where we talk about this. If you see it and feel differently, let us know. If you agree, let's go have some fun making fun of this movie as well. So we'll do the same thing with that.
And moving on to our second film review of the week, we have Lord of the Rings: A War of the Rohirrim. So this is an animated film set in the Lord of the Rings universe that is kind of loosely connected to the live action Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films, because we do see a lot of the music intertwined. We have even the commercials, they had scenes from the live action Lord of the Rings mixed into it. But this takes place 183 years before Fellowship of the Ring. So it's kind of giving us more history of Rohan and of Gondor and of the past. And, you know, we have our main character with Hera. So we kind of meet up where they're trying to determine what's happening with Rohan. We have Helm Hammerhand, who's voiced by Brian Cox, very recognizable when his voice pops up, that he's approached by another clan that, well, your daughter's going to marry our son Wolf, and we're going to unite, and we're going to show the realm how we are. But they don't get along. They don't like each other. And this kind of kicks off all the events that we have. This one meeting that they just show up out of the blue kicks off a war and a battle that, you know, in the end, I enjoyed it overall. It has its problems and its issues as well. It's not up to par where Peter Jackson's was, but I thought it was a fun movie in the end, that it gave us a different look at kind of the history of some locations and how some things got their names, and maybe some legacy of characters and their ancestors moving down. But I thought overall it was a fun, decent film that they did, that I'm looking forward if they do more of them. But it could have been better, but I had fun with it.
Yeah, I like the style that they chose to make this movie in. Like, the animation looks solid. It's definitely got that. It's definitely heavily influenced by. You could see some of the anime influences that are in there. I don't want to spoil like the animation style if you haven't seen it yet, but it's based on some fairly popular like old school anime, which I love. I'm a fan of, and I thought visually it looked fine in that realm. It is. You get some of that exposition on some of the rest of Middle Earth that you're used to seeing in the Lord of the Rings films. You know, obviously this is centered around Rohan, which is very important throughout the course of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy as well. You get like a very cool, you know, lead into a very famous battle that happens in the Lord of the Rings films as well, where you get the kind of discovery and the origins of like Helm's Deep, where it's one of the most beautifully shot fight scenes in cinematic history, in my opinion. It takes place there, so you get some of that exposition. You get, you know, some light introductions to some other very well-known, you know, Lord of the Rings characters. You get, talking a little spoilery here, towards the end of the film, you get an appearance by Saruman, who they use, you know, some of the voice recordings of the late great Christopher Lee, that you get some of his. You really get one line of dialogue. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of that, but you get like a line that he recorded for Lord of the Rings to use that he never used in the film, but you get to use in this. So it's cool to have that little ode to Christopher Lee in there. Obviously, by the end of the film, our main character is off to meet this wizard,
the wonderful wizard,
very clearly. And they say his name eventually, but when you say I'm off to see this wizard, your mind immediately goes to Gandalf, and he's like, his name is Gandalf, and we're like, yay, like we love Gandalf. But like it was fun. Like, I had fun with it. Like, it's a very serious tone in the movie. Not as much lightheartedness as you would get from some of the Lord of the Rings stuff that they tried to throw in there. This is very much more of a serious tone to this movie, where it's all about, you know, revenge and war and battles and like control of this land in this area. And I think they do a fine job of that. I felt like if it was lacking anything, it was a little more variation in tone, because the tone felt very one note throughout the entire film. And that would probably be my biggest criticism of it, because it just felt very flat in tone. Like it sits here and just kind of maintains that throughout the entire film. Action-wise in the film, very good, very solid, very graphic, like in some ways, like strong violence in there, like action, like in the show. But the tone of the film overall felt very one note to me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And you also got, which I wanted to point out, that Miranda Otto returned as Awen, so she narrated the movie some. So, of course, she's one of the most famous maidens of Rohan that we got to hear her return. And there's some clips out there of her talking about that she'd love being able to come back and play the character again, even if it's just her voice. But, yeah, I thought overall it did stay very serious and very dark. But I think that also led to a few of the issues. So we're going to stay with some spoilers for this. Is that the main antagonist in here is Wolf. So as I mentioned, him and his dad show up to them and kind of demand that she's going to marry my son no matter what, and they're like, no, it's not going to happen. So they both decide, like, gentlemanly agreement, we're going to go outside and we're going to fight about it. Yeah. And so, the dad, he lands a tons of punches on Helm Hammerhand, which that's a tongue twister of a name that always gets me tied up there, but he lands a bunch of punches and hits. I think he's the one that throws the first punch, and hitting him, and Helm only throws one punch and ends up killing the dad, and this sets Wolf off on this grand revenge tour. But it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because Wolf was present for everything. He knows that the history between those two, they know that they agreed to go fight about it. They know that Helm didn't do anything. He killed his dad, but it was one single hit. He watched it happen. He knows that he called it off, didn't have anything else to do. Like, he did it in the most diplomatic way possible, but Wolf went on this kind of rampage that he is not stopping until he's wiped out the entire bloodline of Helm Hammerhand. And, that was a little too much to me. We don't really get a strong feeling on, his dad was killed. But why was he never listened to any of his generals, anybody around him. He just wanted to see the world burn. And it was also towards the end of some of the action sequences. They know that he's going to fight dirty. He's shown him multiple times, but they still give him the benefit of doubt that, all right, we're going to let you turn yourself in. We're going to stop. We're not going to finish you. We're not going to do this and that. And of course, he does what he does every single time. Like
you never learn.
Why did... Yeah, so a lot of the stuff with Wolf there, that kind of drug me down a little bit, because I didn't feel as strong with him. But it was also because it's nothing against the voice actor for him. So I'm trying to find my notes here. So Luca Pasqualini was Wolf, or Lino. Sorry, I butchered your name. He sounded like Jon Snow. All I heard through the entire movie when Wolf spoke was Jon Snow. And that did take me, that's my own problem with it, but it took me a little bit out of it, because all I could hear was Jon Snow in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's very, very much obvious that he took inspiration from Jon Snow for that character, but he's also kind of presented a lot of ways like a Jon Snow type, with his aesthetic, the way he looks, the way he carries himself. But yeah, he's very much a revenge rampage, and doesn't care what anybody's got to say. I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to get my revenge, and I don't care what strategies you all have. But yeah, at the same time, they were all he shows his hand multiple times, I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. And nobody smartened up and tried to get creative with how to stop him until the very end of the film, which is I get it. It makes for a more dramatic story for him to get away with things for so long in this movie, but at the same time, it's just logically, that kind of took me out of it a little bit too, where I'm just you'd think somebody would understand, hey, we know what he's doing. How can we prepare and stop this? But at the end of the day, it makes for a compelling enough story to where you want to see him get his comeuppance by the end, which he ultimately does. Spoiler. But it was a little over the top for me as far as that goes, where it's not as believable, but at the end, it's a fantasy film. What are we doing here?
Because there was two sequences towards the end. Again, there's some spoilers with this, that they've retreated from their city and their town back to what will be known as Helm's Deep, and they're locked behind, and they already know through lore and through everything with this place, if they get in there, you're not getting them out. Well, basically, Wolf and his second in command show up by themselves out in the open, talking to him about it. They have archers lined all across the wall. Movie's over with if they just use logic and they take him out right there, because he's already done some horrendous things. He's already attacked him. He's already had their allies turn against him to fight with Wolf against him and stuff. It's already at the point there. They're at full-fledged war, and they have an opportunity to take them out and they don't. But probably the biggest thing that annoyed me was that past letting them go away, they were able to build this siege tower that they could knock over and get on the wall. It's made out of wood. They have archers, they have fire, but they wait until it's fully built, which also, it felt very Mad Max because there's a drummer on the very top who stays all the way through, even when it crashes down and stuff. But it's also like logic of that time period of them, how high they raise it up in the air and then knock it down. Like, it would have probably shattered, or they wouldn't have been able to raise it. But yeah, having a guy on top raise it that high, shatter it down, and it's not until they bring it down on the wall they're like, oh, this is wood, we can use fire and catch it on fire, and then we do it. Like, that kind of took me out of it a while. I know it's fantasy, it's Lord of the Rings, but I mean, you could say Peter Jackson stayed pretty well with the logic with things. There's some stuff that didn't, but I mean, this was like weeks or months that they're behind the wall, allowing them to build this tower when they could have taken it out immediately. Like, that logic just kind of, I'm thinking about the whole time, well, they could have already taken, all right, now they're just going to allow them to build this big wooden structure that they could catch on fire at any moment, and they just don't do it.
It just doesn't make for compelling storytelling, Brad. Like, what do we need, a 5-minute movie on this? Hey, game over.
It would have been about a 30-minute movie.
Arrow through the heart. We got him. Like, it's done. But no, I get what you're saying. Like, there's certain parts of the movie where you're just shaking your head at it, where it's just like, why did they not mount an offensive on this already? But, you know, at the end of the day, it makes for, you know, it gets us to the battle that we get to, which is wonderfully done. And, you know, we have a very satisfactory conclusion to the story. And, you know, I don't want to put it on, like, I won't put it on Kraven the Hunter level. I think it's a little better than that. But, like, is it going to make my top cut of Lord of the Rings properties? Probably not, but I think it's one worth watching for sure. Like, it's a fun story that's told in that realm. You get a little more exposition, like I said, on Rohan and, you know, that portion of Middle Earth and those people that were around in that time, which feels like it takes place, a couple centuries before the events of the Lord of the Rings film. It's really,
it's 183 years.
Yeah, so it's almost 2 centuries before it takes place. So you get kind of an idea of where that sits in the timeline of things, and just goes to show how wonderfully long that wizards get to live, which is crazy. But yeah, you get a lot of that in this movie, and, you know, I'd say it was okay. Like, it was a little, I'd put it a little above average as far as like a movie goes.
Yeah, and I do think it kind of mimicked a little too much at times of what they've already done. Like, you have a maiden of Rohan who's going to be, well, we have that. Well, they're apprehensive about what they're going to do. Well, we have that. We have Helm's. Well, we have. It does kind of tread on things that we already know. It doesn't mean it's a bad move, but it does kind of retread a few things. And I do have to comment on Helm Hammerhand. Like, it felt more like I was watching Thor.
Very much.
Because I would say the audio was ridiculous in the movie, in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, it was extremely crisp, loud, booming. Like, you had a lot of sequences that was just really immersing you, and you were feeling the film in there. But like, yeah, Helm felt like Thor. We were watching Thor take on stuff, and it was a good character overall, but it did felt like we were almost getting into more mythology. Like, he was almost a god and a mythological creature because of he basically takes on 30, 40 guys with his bare hands in a way that's like, of course, he killed a guy with one punch. He's taking out all of these guys with one punch. Like, he feels like a god in a way. And it didn't take me out of it, but it did make it feel like, all right, so we got a little more almost mythology, old god mythology with Lord of the Rings kind of be mixed in together. But in the end, I did have fun with it. It did have some issues and things that took me out of it. But yeah, I wouldn't put it anywhere near what, you know, Peter Jackson's original trilogy. It's probably in there with The Hobbit, because The Hobbit had its problems and issues. A lot of it was studio involvement. He wanted to stretch it too far. But I would put that kind of down with The Hobbit time. Like, it had some good qualities, it had some bad qualities, but in the end, I was entertained.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair take on it. And it did rehash some of the similar beats that we had in the films. I would agree with that. The audio, like you said, the audio, if we give it a bright spot, it is that. It definitely felt very immersive, like you were in the mix in the film. And it's presented in a way that really, I think, helped enhance the quality of what they were presenting visually, which is it's nice when the audio marries well with the visuals that you're getting. And I think they did a phenomenal job with that. And they may be award-worthy winning for that, just on that aspect of it alone. I don't think it's going to win any other awards necessarily, but they do a good job of making it feel important, like especially in the theater. Like I could feel myself like gripped when it came to like some of these, just the stuff that they were able to sound wise get in there and like make you feel like you're in the battle with them. And it was fun. I still had fun watching it, even though like we're kind of highlighting a lot of the negative stuff in the film. But at the end of the day, I still got some enjoyment out of watching this for sure. So at the end of the day, Lord of the Rings: War of the Rohirrim is a fun look at the back history of Rohan. It's taking place 183 years before the Lord of the Rings films, and you get some things filled in that could kind of lead towards some of the characters that we know from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's fun. It's adventurous. There are problems with some of the story and a little bit of the one-noteness of the tone of the film. And for that reason, I would probably give it somewhere around a 5.5 to a 6 if I were to give it a rating. Just not quite on the par of the levels of the Lord of the Rings, but I would agree that it falls in line with more of the Hobbit movies for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It had some decent action sequences. The animation looked good at times. There was some stuttery, some issues with some of the animation. The sound design was fantastic, but it did retread some of the stories that we have already kind of been told with Rohan. And, there's some logic issues with some of the things that happen as well. So I'd probably put it around a 6 as well. Like, it's not terrible. It's watchable. It's a good film. Even to see, it's a good film to see in theaters because of the sound design. Because if you're falling asleep during the movie for whatever reason, it's going to wake you up because it's that loud and booming. But I think it was a fair attempt to give us something different. It just needed to be cleaned up a little bit with the logic for our main villain, our main story that's being told. Just there was some just story problems and some logic problems that brought it down for me, but it would live around a 6.
I would agree with that. It's one that you definitely should go see. I think it would be fun if you have like surround sound in your house to watch that. If you don't go see it in theaters, watch it in surround sound in your house. You'll get some enjoyment.
Yeah, if you got a good sound system, it's gonna be good.
Absolutely.
So Lord of the Rings: War of the Rohirrim is in theaters now. Go check it out. See what you think about it. You may love it more than we did. Like we're huge fans of the films, of the books. Everyone, it's kind of even with the original films, there's a lot of different opinions on it. Some I absolutely love them. There's other people who don't like them because they left out stuff. So your opinion on Lord of the Rings: War of the Rohirrim could be a lot different than ours. Let us know. Come in our comments. Go to our Discord. Let us know what you thought about it, what you didn't like, what you did like. We'd love to talk about it with you. But it's in theaters now. Go check it out.
Absolutely. Now we want to get to the winners of our latest giveaway. You've seen these on our table for the last couple episodes. Thank you once again to Skyline Chili for donating these two $50 gift cards. Thank you so much to everybody who entered into our sweepstakes for this giveaway, leaving your comments on the videos. We can't thank you enough for your support. And it is time to announce our two winners. So our very first winner is at Ray Goring 1387. Ray Goring, who says her favorite holiday film was Elf. We love that. We love Elf. It's one of our favorites as well. So congratulations to Ray for winning that. We'll be in contact with you shortly to get your information, to get this to you hopefully in time for Christmas. And our other winner is at Jedi X Noodles, who is our good friend Jenny Kring, another friend of the podcast. Thank you so much for your support as well. She mentioned her favorite movie is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Speaks to my heart because it's my favorite as well. But congrats to Jenny for winning that. And we hope you enjoy this stuff. We'll be in touch with you both shortly to get this to you. But thank you for your support as always. Merry Christmas. And we'll be getting these to you very soon.
Yeah, big congratulations. Thanks for coming to the YouTube comments, leaving about the Elf. I just watched it with the family the other day. I need to watch National Lampoons. I still haven't had the chance to get to it because I've had classes and other stuff for work that's taken me out, but that's on my list to watch again this week because I have to watch it every single year. Fantastic movies with big congratulations again to both of you. Can't wait to get this to you. Hopefully they end up getting to you before Christmas. We'll get them out next week or this week when the episode airs. We'll get it out this week, but we'll be in contact soon. But I want to head on over to what's coming up. So we've got another kind of big weekend for movies. So we're kind of ending the year with a lot of big double features here. Yeah. So this is kind of the big family weekend. You have Sonic the Hedgehog 3. The first two Sonic the Hedgehog films have done gangbusters. Now you're adding in Keanu Reeves as Shadow. You've got Jim Carrey back playing two different Robotniks. It looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. My girls cannot wait to see it. But we also got Mufasa the Lion King. We have the prequel to The Lion King coming out as well, doing the CGI live action again. And both of those are expected to do extremely well this weekend.
Yeah, big family week at the theater this week. Excited to go see both of those films. Like you said, we've got double features kind of to end the year on for both of the next couple weeks. So these are two films that I'm very excited to check out. You also had the successful Knuckles TV show on Paramount Plus as well. So continuation of that Sonic story. Excited for that. And Lion King, for my opinion, is my favorite Disney film of all time. Most amazing soundtrack in my opinion as well. So excited to check out the Mufasa film too.
Yeah, if those two are not up your alley for whatever reason, we also have the Nicole Kidman Baby Girl film, which looks really intriguing. It kind of almost takes me back to Eyes Wide Shut that she did with Tom Cruise, but it's different that she's got a younger man that's telling her what to do and her affair and everything that's running through it. And you also got Homestead, which is kind of a apocalyptic movie where the nuclear bombs or something that has been launched towards the U.S. So it's, if you're not into the family stuff, you have a couple different films that you can go check out as well. We also have a limited release out this week with The Brutalist. So this is an Adrian Brody, Guy Pearce. It's a 3.5 hour long movie with an intermission. It cost, which this really surprised me after looking at the trailer too. Like, it's set back during the World Wars. I believe World War II is where it's set within, but it only cost under $10 million to make.
That's crazy.
And it doesn't look like it. Just like we had with Godzilla -1, we have a couple films here that show you can pull off some impressive stuff with a low budget. It's already, you can look at the Golden Globe nominations. The Brutalist was in there for a lot of it. So it's an interesting one to check out.
Yeah, stellar cast as well. I saw the trailer for it. It looks like a great watch. I'm excited to check that one out. I don't think it's coming anywhere near us theater-wise for its limited release, but when it comes to streaming, that's one I'm absolutely going to check out.
It's one of those small releases in the major cities and stuff, basically for award season, to make sure that they're out here for the awards. But on streaming side, we have the 6888 on Netflix on December 20th. So this is a Kerry Washington film that's about the only women of color Army Corps during World War II. So I've seen the trailer for this a few times. It looks really interesting. I'm looking forward to checking out. I'm kind of a sucker for anything when it has to do with the World Wars and stuff. We got to see some decent shows and stuff set this year within it. So I'm looking forward to see how that turns out on December 20th.
Yeah, that's another one that's definitely on my list to check out. It looks fantastic, and I love Kerry Washington, so I'm absolutely going to be checking that one out too.
We also had a surprise drop by Red One on December 12th, and Juror Number 2 also is dropping on December 20th. So that's one that it was kind of weird with its release, because it's a Clint Eastwood movie that was getting a lot of good buzz and stuff behind it, but it got a very small theatrical run, and then it's just straight out to on demand after that. But Red One is one I figured they would try to get out in enough time before Christmas for people to look at. You can go back in our archives to see what we thought about Red One. But I am kind of looking forward to watching again to see if my opinion changes. Absolutely. Watching at home because we've had a lot of issues with people in theaters. The last couple movies, we've been pretty lucky that people have had more proper etiquette. I've ruined it. The rest of the year, it's going to be terrible. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's been lucky with that, but we've had a lot of problem with theater etiquette. And hopefully that's something in 2025 that theater chains can help with. As we know, the Alamo Drafthouse, they're big on telling people, we'll kick you out and ban you if you're talking and on your phone during the movies. And we need to get more of the change with Cinemark, AMC, and more on board of like, hey, keep your phone away, be quiet, watch the movie.
And it could not agree more. But yeah, I was excited that Red One wound up dropping on Amazon Prime. If you have Prime Video, it's on there now. Go watch it before the holiday. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Come to our social medias and let us know. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. 50 episodes in the can. I'm so grateful that you've joined us for this journey. We're 2 episodes away from finishing an entire year, and we have many more episodes to come that I'm excited for. Next week, we will be reviewing Mufasa the Lion King and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Excited to check both of those films out and bring it to you, as always. But until next time, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.